Hey there friends, Andrea Walford here. Welcome to Make Beautiful Cards. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this boho thank you card featuring Stampin' Up's Boho Indigo Product Medley. So I started off with a 3 3/4 by 5 inch piece of Whisper White cardstock, and I drew a line using my mechanical pencil at 1 1/8 of an inch up from the bottom. Then, using my Stamparatus stamp positioning tool, I took the largest vase from the Boho Indigo stamp set and placed it stamp side down so that it was sitting on that pencil line. And that helps me determine where exactly I want it stamped on my cardstock piece. From there, all I have to do is shut the door of my Stamparatus, and as you can see, it picked up the stamp. Now I stamped the vase in my Tuxedo Memento black ink, and because I wanted as dark an impression as I could, I inked my stamp up a second time and double stamped the image. Now even then, I found that when this dried, it still came out as a very dark gray color. Now for my leaves, I basically positioned it the same way that I did with the vase, just placed it directly over the top of the vase where I wanted it, picked it up with the door of my Stamparatus, and then I was able to ink it up with my Granny Apple Green Classic ink and stamp it. Now my next step was to create my greeting. So I took the thank you from the Peaceful Moments stamp set, and I stamped it onto a piece of basic black cardstock using Whisper White pigment ink. Now first, as you saw, I ran my embossing buddy over it to reduce the static, so that when I sprinkled on my white embossing powder, I didn't get any embossing powder where I didn't want it. So it keeps it contained to the image. And then any extra little flecks of embossing powder you can just flick off or use the tip of your paper piercing tool to get it off your cardstock. Now to heat emboss it, as you can see, I'm using a heat tool and I'm holding it about an inch away from the surface of my stamped image. And when I'm heat embossing, because the heat tends to warp the paper a bit, I like to heat from both sides. Now, rather than creating a greeting strip, I decided that I wanted to fussy cut my greeting out. So for this, I used my paper snips and I cut so that I stayed about 1/16 of an inch away from the edges of the letters. Now, I do have a video that I will link to that shares tips and tricks to get perfect fussy cut images. Now, I decided to custom color my own ribbon since I didn't have the exact color that I wanted for my project. So I used the white ribbon that comes as part of Stampin' Up's Flowers for Every Season ribbon combo pack, and I custom colored it using my Dark Magenta Madness Stampin' Blend. Now it's very easy to custom color ribbon. You simply run the brush tip of your marker over your ribbon and then just make sure that you do it on both sides so that it gets evenly colored. And then you just want to make sure you set it aside to dry for a few minutes. I wear a glove to protect my fingers so that I don't accidentally smear my project, which I have done. Now my next step was to punch out some flowers out of Daffodil Delight and Melon Mambo cardstock using my Confetti Border flower punch. Now to give my flowers some dimension, I used a small foam mat and then the stylus ends of my Take Your Pick tool. All I did was I placed each flower onto my little foam mat and then I used one of the stylus ends and pressed into the center of it. And what that does is it gives the flowers just this little cup-like finish. And there's 2 different stylus sizes in the Take Your Pick tool. So I used the larger tip for the larger flowers and then the smaller tip for the smaller flowers. Now, in order to stick my flowers down, I used my fine tip glue pen. So I picked up the flower with my tweezers and then I applied a little dab of that clear glue where I wanted my flowers stuck down. Now, because the glue is a liquid glue, it does take a little bit of time to dry, so you want to make sure that once you've applied all your flowers, you set your piece aside for at least 5 minutes to give that glue a chance to set. Now, the flower punch punched out 3 different sizes of flowers, the small, the medium, and the large. So I made sure that I incorporated all 3 different sizes on my vase and that I also did a combination of the yellow and the Melon Mambo flowers. Now, once I knew the glue was dry, I then carefully erased my pencil line using just a regular white eraser. From there, I centered and stuck my white cardstock piece onto a piece of black cardstock. Now, the white cardstock was 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and my black cardstock was 3 7/8 by 5 1/8 of an inch. In order to give my stamped and matted panel some dimension, I decided that I was going to pop it up using some dimensional foam. Now, normally I might use a dimensional foam strip or some dimensional foam pieces like Stampin' Dimensionals, but I decided instead that I was going to use some fun foam or craft foam. And this is something that you can buy in the kids' crafts section of your local big box craft store. Sticking it to your cardstock is super easy. You just use tear and tape adhesive, which is a nice thin double-sided adhesive, and you apply it to both sides of the fun foam and then remove the backing to attach it. Now I used that same tear and tape adhesive to stick my ribbon. So I put a strip of it underneath my vase, and then I trimmed the ends of my custom colored ribbon on an angle, and then I simply pleated the ribbon and stuck it as I was pleating it to that tear and tape adhesive. Now I wanted the pleating to look a little bit random, so I wasn't trying to match the pleats perfectly. Instead, what I did was I allowed some pleats to be a little bit higher and some pleats to be a little bit lower. Once I was happy with the placement of my ribbon, I then trimmed the end using my paper snips. Now I wasn't totally happy with the placement of my ribbon, so I simply took the end, peeled it back a little bit, and then re-pleated it until I was happy. Now to make sure that that ribbon really didn't go anywhere or the pleats didn't unravel, because of course only a certain section of the ribbon sticks to the tear and tape, I took some mini glue dots and then just placed them underneath the pleats, pressing the pleat down against the mini glue dot. So once I was finished securing the ribbon, then I was able to take my thank you greeting and stick that down. Now I wanted to give it a little bit of dimension, so for that I grabbed my mini Stampin' Dimensionals and I placed them on the back of my fussy cut greeting. At the very end, because it was a little bit too narrow for one of those mini dimensionals, I simply cut a little piece off the edge of the dimensional sheet. From there, it was simply a matter of peeling off the backing and then making sure that the greeting was centered between the left and right edges, and then slightly overlapping the ribbon at the bottom, and then pressing it down. To embellish my card, I decided to use my in-color enamel dots, and I took one little Magenta Madness and one Bumblebee enamel dot and stuck them just above the thank you towards the bottom of the vase. Then I took the smallest rhinestones from my Rhinestone Basic Jewels and added one to each of the larger flowers. And then I took a medium one and added that to the top of my vase. Now for the rest of the flowers, I didn't want to leave them just as is, so I took a white Sharpie poster paint pen and I simply placed a little white dab of paint in the center of each of those flowers. My final step was to place my panel onto my card front, which was a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch Melon Mambo note card. And all I had to do was remove the backing from that tear and tape adhesive because I had already placed it on the fun foam. And there you have it. As you can see, our card is finished. So friends, now you know how to make this boho thank you card. If you enjoyed this video tutorial, please leave me a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, I'd love to know in the comments if you want me to keep doing sped up videos with voiceover like this one, or if you prefer the slower pace and additional details you get with my real-time videos. Thanks so much, friends. I'll be back soon with another video tutorial. See ya!